please welcome onto the stage Greg Jackson, founder and CEO of Octopus Energy. It feels to me so rapid, the emergence of Octopus and what you're doing now. It feels like it's happened in the last 6 months. I know it hasn't. Can you just give us a quick potted history of how you got from when you first started? I think I met you in the very early days to where you are now, because it's just astronomical, really.
It's funny you say that, because I'm actually terrified. We're nearly 9 years old.
Right.
And, you go so quickly from feeling like, wow, I can't believe I've done so much so fast,
yeah,
to terrified that, if it's not, it's all going to slow down. And
yes.
So thank you for the reminder. It feels quick to you. But I've also got to say, I think the thing behind us is very similar to the thing behind everything electric,
yeah,
and what you've done, which was we spotted the inevitable energy transition.
Yeah.
And because we started with no legacy, we were able to just get fully into what is it going to take to build a global transition that's cheaper and faster than anyone recognizes. Because if you looked at the cost of wind, the cost of solar,
yeah,
the cost of batteries is falling 13% per year.
Right.
If you look at all of that, it is inevitable this is going to win. So we just started backing it at the right time.
Right. And I mean that, and have you seen that, a shift in public opinion / acceptance of what you're proposing? Because I mean, certainly when I first started talking about electric cars, there was a general big resistance saying they don't work, they're not safe, they've done all their excuses, they're too boring to repeat. Did you get that same kind of initial resistance, or was it fairly straightforward to get customers? I'm thinking,
Yeah. Well, I think when we started, we didn't know that electric cars were going to be the thing that drove the change.
Right.
Right. So what we could see was that all the sources of energy, renewables, were just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And of course, because of climate change, the world would have to go this way.
Yeah.
I think what happened was you could see that electric cars were coming out, and when you had a go in them, it was a transformative experience. You were like, this isn't just a cleaner, a sort of, you're not buying this because you're a hippie,
no,
right? Although you may be, and all power to you, but actually this is an upgrade. This is better than,
yes,
and I remember like this magical feeling, the first time I drove my first electric car, I was like, anyone that does this is never going back. Now, obviously I was wrong.
Yeah.
Only 4% want to go back.
Yes.
So, anyway.
Some people do want to go back. But and would you see then, in a sense, the EV as being a really integral part of that shift? Is that, because from my experience, it's been people I've known who put solar panels on their roof, just after a few weeks went, well, I could charge my car off those. I'll get an electric car. And vice versa. People who get an electric car, I'll go, well, I can fill my electric car from my roof. Is that a correlation you've seen?
I think, first of all, policymakers, governments and regulators and industries have obsessed over the source of electricity. I just did it. I talked about renewables.
Yeah.
But from a consumer point of view, I think the electric vehicle is the transformer. It's the gateway drug.
Yeah.
I think solar panels were really ever just, for most people, a financial instrument. You can get cheap electricity or get a better return on your money than a pension fund or whatever.
Right.
But for an electric car, it's a significant experiential change in your life. And I think but once you've got that, you absolutely think, hang on, if I can charge this car for, 6 times cheaper than driving a petrol car on a smart tariff, what if I get solar panels? And by the way, if I can get electricity that cheap, what if I get a heat pump? And so what we found is once people got an electric car, they start changing everything. And this, I'm sure we'll talk about the media, you mentioned it already, the media kind of backlash against EVs. Imagine what it is like being the fossil fuel industry at the moment.
Yes.
Because every single electric car is the end of that bit of power and dominance you've got over someone's life or over an economy.
Yeah.
And then you see that once people get an electric car, they start getting solar or powering it from green energy or getting heat pumps. And they can see the inevitable accelerating end of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And the reason we have this backlash is entirely driven by that existential threat. And the electric car is not only a big part of it, it's the driver of it.
Right, right. Because, I mean, it's got to be, I mean, I have sympathy with the fossil fuel industry simply because what else are they going to do except stop what they've been doing for the last 100 years and completely change their business model, which is incredibly difficult when you've got that massive investment already embedded, you know.
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for them. Right?
Okay, you don't.
No, and I think, look, first of all, look, I'm not religious about this.
Yeah.
Octopus is the second biggest seller of gas to households.
Right.
You know, we do this. I think, though, what we've got to remember is that energy is such a phenomenally powerful industry. They've got all these lobbying forces to insist that we have an orderly transition, that we look after sort of the people in it. And of course, I want the people to do okay.
Yeah.
But Argos didn't get that when Amazon arrived.
No.
Right? And I think the move to electric vehicles is much more important than the move to online retail.
Yes.
Now, if we let rip on the move to online retail, we should let rip on the move to clean energy into EVs.
Yeah.
And instead, European governments are tripping over themselves to slow down the transition to protect their incumbent automakers.
Yeah.
And look, as a consumer, I think that's pretty awful.
Yeah.
As someone who cares about the planet, it's terrible. And the tragedy is that the longer they try to extend the lives of those kind of outdated technologies, the more they're opening the gap between Europe, the US, and China, which is investing like billio in the new world.
Yeah.
And I think, like, if we're going to do the right thing by the people that work in these industries, what we need to do is let the transition happen rather than kind of deny it, because eventually it'll burst like a dam.
Yes.
But if we let the transition happen, those people can be moving into great new jobs, right? While they move from one highly relevant company to another. And 55% of the people that install our heat pumps used to be gas engineers.
Right.
Right? And it's a great career progression.
Yeah.
But it only happens if we let the transition happen rather than if we try and guard the old industry or the old companies.
Well, in a sense, it's like, I mean, all the people I've spoken to who are working in offshore wind, all of the people I've ever spoken to who actually are working on installation used to work in the oil and gas industry, offshore oil and gas.
And none of them would go back.
No, they don't want to go. I've done a windmill. I want to go back to that massive oil rig. Yes, that doesn't happen. I mean, because you've just been in China, so because I've never been, so you've seen it, and we've heard a lot from Elliot, who lives there, and also we had Bono from BYD on Friday morning. But I mean, you've seen firsthand that transition from our standpoint, because I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot about it. I mean, it was impressive.
I think. Mind-blowing is the only word. Now, I went because I'd seen the data, but you want to see what's going on under the hood, what's really happening.
Right.
So a few things that I think the West should really think about. The top-level data is that Western countries, the UK, Europe, America, accelerated to about 20% of end use of energy being electricity up to 10 years ago, and they've stalled.
Right.
China's now at 33% and is accelerating. We've got used to this idea of China as being like, dirty on energy. It's been building coal plants. I think this year is going to be peak coal for China. They are shifting away from it as fast as they were building it. 59% of all the renewable energy built in the world last year was in China.
Insane. Yeah.
54% of all the cars sold in China so far this year are electric. It's heading to 60%. The Chinese state oil company predicts no filling stations will exist in China by 2045. By the way, they operate the filling stations.
Right. And they're predicting there won't be any by 20. That's
right. That's and they're not doing this because they're nice people, although, by the way, they may well be, and if they're listening, but it's because they understand that energy is the primary input to industry.
Yeah.
And now that renewables are the cheapest form of energy, their industrial competitiveness depends on the shift to renewables. But the other thing that really struck me was on the streets of Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, 5 or 6 years ago, everyone wore face masks, not because of COVID,
no,
but because of air pollution.
Yeah.
It's all gone. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. I'm pretty sure the air in New York was dirtier than the air in Shenzhen.
Right.
Right? And I think that, for me, epitomizes what's happening at the moment. There's a real risk that in 10, maybe even fewer years' time, we look like kind of middle-income, underdeveloped economies because we're still burning stuff that we don't need to. And I think policy, in a way, it feels like the 1970s for those that are old enough to remember it. I am just honest. And in the 1970s, government in the UK kept trying to defend the existing car industry to the point it became so low quality, so shoddy and so expensive, it died. And what saved it was cooperating with Japanese, well, not even saved it, just created a whole new one.
Yes.
Was cooperating with the Japanese companies in the 1980s that had started without all the legacy. And we have to make sure we don't do that to our economy and indeed to our industries.
Right. Yeah, very good point. Because I mean, it is that it's worth, if you, I'm sure many of you have been, but if you haven't, it's worth a visit to the Gaydon Motor Museum and looking at a BMC car made in about 1972. And when people talk about panel gaps in Teslas, forget it. You know, these were just gaps.
I mean, you didn't need a door.
They barely had a panel. Yeah, no, it was not a time of glory in this country. I just want to quickly say, because I'm sure there will be some of you who would love to ask Greg a question. So there are microphones in the 2 aisles there. If you want to stand behind those, we'll come to you if we can. The time scale, I suppose, the thing that I go in waves about is, oh my God, this is all happening faster than I predicted, or also, oh my God, we're still grinding along on that. We've just about taken off, but we're about 2 feet above the takeoff point. What do you see about that timescale? Are we ramping up that transition, or is it stalling, or is it going backwards, or where are we standing at the moment?
I think some metrics are slower than we would like.
Right.
Others are flying. But underlying, the power of the transition is increasing.
Right.
And it's increasing because the phenomenal progress on cost, which means that, you know, someone was asking me earlier about, you know, what's the price of electricity going to be? You know, shall I get a battery or not? And honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because in the short term, these things move around a lot. But underneath it all, you know, the cost of solar panels has halved in the last 18 months, right?
Right.
And it had already come down 200-fold over the last 40 years.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you're getting to the point where if some buildings, it's cheaper to put solar panels in.
Much cheaper than tiles. Tiles are really expensive. That's a luxury item now. So only the rich can afford tiles.
So when you look at it like that, it becomes a sort of bizarre that we even have this conversation.
Yeah.
When you look at the way things are at the moment, though, the current market structures are all designed around the energy market of the past.
Yeah.
And so, time and again, people like me and politicians will say, wind power, it's the cheapest form of power we've ever had. Let's build more wind. And that's true. But consumers don't see the benefit. And they don't see the benefit because we're trying to make wind behave like coal.
Right.
So with coal, you can turn on a coal power station, you get a rectangle of power, you turn it off. With wind, it's kind of like when it's windy, we've got cheap power. And we need to re-engineer so much of our economy to use that renewable at the time it's been generated. So that, for example, that's when we're charging cars. It's what the intelligent tariffs do. But industry can work like that as well.
Yeah.
You know, you know, even things like data centers, AI data centers have got much more discretion over how and when they use power.
Right.
But at the moment, our energy market, for example, the UK has a single national price every half hour. So if there's a supply constraint in the southeast of England, in London, that will set the national price.
At a higher rate, wow.
You know, it'd be
but there could be buckets of very cheap energy coming from Scotland at the same time.
In Scotland, it could be windy. In fact, it usually is. And so, but the price to Scottish people will be the same as the one in London.
Right.
And we'll pay the wind turbines to turn off. And we'll pay them the price that London is paying for its electricity.
Yeah.
So you're paying top dollar for no electricity, and the people who are using electricity are paying top dollar for it, even though they've got a wind farm next door.
Yeah.
Isn't turning. That's mad.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to be able to do, and by the way, it's mad that, I mean, someone who knows a lot about these things said to me, look, we just need to stop building wind farms in Scotland, because we're building them because it's windy, right?
Yeah.
And that might be an extreme view, by the way, I'm not advocating it, but as a characterization, we keep building where the subsidies are, not where the demand is.
Right.
If we build, even though land in the southwest of England is more expensive, there's so much capacity in the southwest, and it's not as windy there, but if we build a wind farm in the southwest of England, the electricity that you deliver to consumers would be 1.4 to 2.6 times cheaper than when we build it in Scotland.
Right.
But we just don't at the moment, no one's benefiting from that, not in the UK. Countries that are benefiting from it, like in Scandinavia, where they've done this, industry is flocking to the north, where they've got the cheapest electricity.
Yeah.
Spain and Greece. I've literally had conversations with data center companies that are moving or building in Spain and Greece, not the UK, because of cheap electricity, cheap renewable electricity.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to understand that in the same way that when we built things like the steel industry, it was all built where you had cheap iron ore and cheap coal. In the same way, things like data centers need to be built where we've got cheap renewables.
Yeah.
And again, if we had this market reform I'm talking about, Scotland would be the cheapest electricity in Europe.
Right.
The cheapest. Industry would flock there. And so I guess the big picture, and we'd be investing in the right stuff. In the southeast of England, we'd be doing cheap deals on solar panels because we need as much generation there as we can. We'd be building batteries and doing cheap deals on EVs so we could manage those constraints. At the moment, we can't do any of this. And so the economics of energy mean that the investment in the UK, we still have these conversations about investing into oil and gas, and it being harder to invest into renewables. And the reason it's harder is the market is set up for the days of the past.
Yes, yes. I mean, and it's a very frustrating thing to hear that. I'm just seeing if there's no one wants to ask you a question, Greg. There we go. Who
Hang on, there's one there.
There is someone.
One
yes.
there. One there.
Oh my God, they're all
coming now. Yeah.
Damn, I shouldn't have said anything. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I mean, when started, it was all the big six, and you were there with the innovation, not just financial, but also the way that you've opened up tariffs so that people can connect with them, and use like IFTT and things like that. Where do you see the innovation going in the future with Octopus Energy?
Yeah. It's really interesting. This conversation I'm having about the market is so important for exactly that question. I think we optimize, we've got people on the intelligent Octopus tariff. Every car gets a different schedule every day, optimized against 29 variables. But 30% of the time, we're actually doing it at the wrong time if you look at the underlying physics of the system, because we're basing on the price the system's got rather than the real abundance of electricity in your location. I think the way energy needs to go is that we get more and more granular data. So if you live in the southwest of England and it's windy and there's some wind farms nearby, you're getting bonkers cheap electricity. And your heat pump and your EV and your home battery are all optimizing against that. If we do that, we really can look forward to electricity prices falling every year. But it needs this granularity and it needs the digitization of the grid. So at the moment, I sometimes feel like a lot of the work we're doing is like we're trying to build kind of, data centers at the end of a copper line, an old-fashioned copper line,
right?
Because we just don't have enough information to do a good job. But back on that opening up, I think a large part of it is we can't do it all ourselves, and we relentlessly invite other manufacturers, even other energy companies, to use our technology, because I think the speed of the energy transition, we've got to do this over the next 10, 15. I mean, it's already too late, but we need to accelerate, and we can't do that alone.
I mean, I'd quickly like to, because I'll come to the next question, but quickly like to mention Kraken, because that's something, it's something that I guess as the general public, as a consumer, we wouldn't be aware of. But the success of that around the globe has been quite extraordinary. Can you do a brief explanation of what that does?
Yeah, so about the team that started Octopus, we came from a technology background. We used to build enterprise software. And actually, from the outside of the energy industry, just as customers, we spotted that energy was running on really, really outdated technology. And that meant that people were paying too much, companies were bloated, inefficient, made too many mistakes, and service was terrible. But it also meant that they thought big data was a monthly meter reading. Whereas, doing some of these intelligent things we do, you might be doing 4,000 meter readings a day for an individual household. And so we saw the opportunity to build technology to fix this. That technology is called Kraken. We use it to build Octopus, and then as Octopus got bigger, we licensed it to other companies. So I know it's E.ON next to here. They run on Kraken. EDF do in the UK, they're here too, I think. And but also we license it around the world. So more than half of the value of Octopus as a group is actually Kraken.
Right. No, it is amazing. Yes, sir, question, thank you.
Yeah, we have a new government. What's your opinion, Greg, of their attitude to green energy? And Robert, did we invite anybody? And if we did they respond? And if not, why not?
Yeah, you do you first.
No, okay.
So I need to be told. I'm not sure, but yes.
A funny thing about my job is I used to be able to talk very candidly, like I was in the pub, about these things, and then one day I discovered that people report what I say. However, I'm going to be very candid anyway, which is, first of all, I was over the moon of their 5 missions. The second one was about green energy. There were attempts to turn the green energy into a culture war before the election, especially after the Uxbridge, ULEZ kind of blown out of all proportion nonsense.
Yeah.
I was glad they had the confidence to do that, and they won after doing that, because I think most people know that green energy is the route to cheap and more secure energy. And we can't forget, it's only 2 or 3 years since the government had to spend 100 billion quid because of the gas crisis.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I just want to say that I think the general public, everyone knows that the electricity prices went up because of gas, not because of offshore wind or solar panels.
Yeah, and it's, the wholesale price of gas is still 3 times higher than it was in 2020, which is why bills are still roughly double what they were. Yeah. I think the other quick thing, though, is the government came out the traps delivering on their promise with all the announcements they made about planning, and that's going to be crucial for building renewable infrastructure. I think now what we need to see is continued bravery. It's a bit like in motor racing. When you hit the gravel, you really slow down, and they need to be able to accelerate through this gravel of government, and they need to accelerate with grid reform so we can connect stuff. I think there are going to be announcements on that early in the new year. And crucial market reform, so that consumers see the benefit. That we have to give consumers the benefit. If you get a wind farm, particularly near you, prices come down. We've got to see that.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Did you invite them?
Oh, no, sir. I don't know. We didn't. No, we didn't invite anyone, did we? No, we didn't invite anyone, and they didn't say no. So maybe we should in future. Yes, we should, I think. But it's, yeah. But, I mean, I think we've always tried to sort of skim around very obvious party politics, just as you know, it's, yeah. I mean, well, we had a visit from the Transport Minister, whose name, the Tory one. What's his name? Grant, my mate Grant.
Oh, Grant Shapps.
Grant Shapps. We're great mates. We walked arm in arm around the show. Yes, sir.
Hi, Greg. Obviously, all the good things you've been saying you and Octopus are doing to try and speed up this transition, all amazing. So apart from everybody using Octopus stuff, what else can kind of normal people or individuals actually do to help this progression?
You know, first of all, can I say something really controversial? I get asked this a lot, and it's a trick of the fossil fuel industry is to try and put the blame for carbon back on consumers, right?
Yes, well said, Greg, well said.
And I hope that doesn't sound too cynical, but you know, the reality is that consumers respond to price signals, and we need to keep making the clean solutions the cheapest and the best. And that's why I'm so focused on the stuff we're talking about today. But you know, and the crying tragedy when we kind of blame individuals is people get obsessed over whether a coffee cup's got a plastic lid. And of course, it's terrible when we see plastic in the Pacific or whatever, right? But you know, the things that are really doing the most damage in the world are burning stuff on a massive scale. And so the most important things we can do are move to an electric car. Well, in fact, obviously no car at all if you can. But I mean, I'm not going to advocate, you know, because again, the more we say things like that, the more you know, people who don't like saving the planet will say these people are telling you, you know, you've got to change your life.
Freedom of choice or whatever.
Yeah. So I think actually the biggest job is on companies like us to say it's our job to make it so you can live the life you want, but without doing the damage. And so actually, coming back to your opening, I'm thinking about it, switch to Octopus, help us in this mission. Yes. But not just us. I mean, I think that really does apply. But honestly, let's put the blame on companies, because they're the ones that have got the lobby. So one thing that happens a lot of people in the energy industry will get quite grumpy when I lobby for things like locational pricing, because they really enjoy getting paid not to generate wind. They enjoy subsidies rather than having to work hard to cut prices. And they get really grumpy that we say these things, right? But and a minister said to me, "But Greg, why are so many of the industry like the opposite side for you?" And I said, "Well, look, the industry are enjoying what they're getting, but there's no one lobbying for consumers. You know, one company that is on the other side of them employ 150 people in lobbying, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine how powerful that is, and they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't getting a return on it. So yeah, I think the most important thing we can do is actually like shift to clean energy solutions, but most importantly, push back against that cynical lobbying.
Here, here. Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to switch the conversation to microgeneration. So the absence of wind as a micro-generating source, there is technology, a lot in Holland, don't see that in the UK, Greg. And also vehicle-to-grid charging. I think some of the problems we're having on storage can also be solved through being able to power back to the home from vehicles. So basically, dare I say it, a Duracell on wheels.
Yeah.
Where do you see those two technologies delivering in probably the short term, not the longer term?
Yeah, great. So look, I really don't know enough about microgeneration of wind, other than our boffins tell me the challenge is it's not usually so windy close to the ground, and the power of a wind turbine is proportional to the square of the length of the blades. And so you really, really want big blades. But honestly, I don't know enough beyond that. On vehicle to grid, it's coming, and it is an absolute game changer. When we've got 10 million electric cars in the UK with vehicle to grid, that can power the whole of the UK at peak time. It's a big part of the answer to the question, what do you do when it's not windy and when it's not sunny? Today, an example of that power is, I think, for people who've got it already, we give them 13,000 miles a year of free charging. And that's not because we're nice people. It's because the economics of the variability on the grid make that work. And it's only going to get bigger with more renewables. In terms of when it's coming, at the moment, there's not that many cars can do it. And there's a chicken and egg problem. In many countries around the world, it's virtually illegal to do it in Germany. And so in many countries in the world, regulation has held back the ability for consumers to do it, which means the car companies haven't put it in the cars. But when we were with BYD in their HQ 6 weeks ago, we were talking to them about kind of look the need now to put it back. They actually had it originally, and they took it out because no one was using it. I think they'll be putting it back. And then we just need to get the cost of the chargers down. At the moment, vehicle-to-grid chargers are far too expensive. That's just volume. The actual underlying power electrics is not particularly complicated. So I think over the next 5 years or so, it'll become pretty normal.
Yeah,
and it needs to.
Just want to quickly say, I've just been with Renault in Paris, and all their new models now come with bi-directional. It's built into the car from the ground up. So that is, I think it is definitely coming. I'm just trying to be fair in doing sides. We've probably only got time for one more, but let's try it. Yes, sir.
Hello. I live on a fairly low income, about 26,000, of which just over 50% is from an occupational pension, and about 40% is from pay for a part-time job, and the remainder being private income. And I was wondering how people like me are going to be able to transition to electric cars, because I would very much like to have an electric car, and Hyundai Insta particularly appeals to me as a car that would fit in my garage, and living in Bristol where parking is almost impossible, the garage is essential for parking a car.
Great. Robert, can I beg you? There are three people standing out. If they all ask, I'll answer them all in one go, really quickly.
Yeah.
Just so that, otherwise it's terrible stuff.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
Yeah, go on.
Yep.
Okay. Building on this whole democratization of energy thing and the macro down to the micro, in between, you've got these community structured things. Obviously, I'm here with CoCharger, but also one of my favorite companies, Ripple, are over there.
Yeah.
One of the best things I've ever heard of. And I know it's integrated into what you're doing, which I find fascinating. It sort of bridges what we're saying here about, what can I do on my house to what's the corporation doing. Just anything you can tell us about that integration and the role that these community things have got in this ecosystem.
Magic.
I think just answer those two, Greg.
Sorry, guys. Right, really quick then. And the answer partly comes together. On affordable electric cars, the cost of batteries is falling at 13% a year, and there are more technology breakthroughs to come that will create big step changes. It means that the cost of a brand new electric car has been falling precipitously. By the way, lots of people in the industry worry about that, but of course, what matters is that makes them more and more affordable, which is a great thing for consumers. And also, we had no second-hand market in electric cars until very recently. So between the falling cost of new cars and the emergence of second-hand ones as the first fleets are being recycled, I think you're going to find electric cars cheaper than petrol cars for many models, like literally in the next year or so. Many models are reaching price parity. We've got to stop governments trying to protect incumbent industry through massive tariffs. In China, it's 20% cheaper to buy an electric car than the equivalent petrol. And we need to see the same differential here and grow. And the reason I say there's a connection is they're already 6 times cheaper to run if you can charge at home, and which sounds like you can.
You can do, yeah.
That's coming because of this ability for us to take every source of electricity, whether it be local generators, micro generators, community generators, as well as, of course, the big national grid stuff. And the reason we need the market reform I talked about is it lets us grab the cheapest electricity, the cheapest times, and squirt it into cars. And we'll work really hard with all of that ecosystem to keep building it out. Because the cheapest electron is a locally generated, renewable one at the time it's been generated.
And I just want to quickly say, to add on to that, that there are now numerous leasing companies that are leasing second-hand cars at incredibly lower rates than it would have been even 3 or 4 years ago. So there are, it's worth having, I mean, they'll be here. It's worth having an ask around.
There's actually one just over there. It's called Octopus Electric Vehicles.
There you go.
And they'll give you a smart tariff and a charger while they're at it.
Smart tariff and a charger. Well, there you go.
I am an Octopus customer, and but the Insta is the first car that will fit in my garage from the electric.
No, it's a great car. No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't really. Well, we can try. Let's try one more. We've got time for one more. We'll go to you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, Greg. I was wondering, do you think there's still a need for there to be a price on the negative externalities of fossil fuel energy? And on the localized pricing thing, if it's like a regulation problem in this country at least, can you not have like communities that at least make their own closed loop generation and battery storage before it goes back into the grid?
Great questions. First of all, on pricing carbon, I'm assuming quite a lot of people have seen the movie Don't Look Up, which you expect is going to be very worthy, but actually is a great watch. And the tragedy of it is, even as the meteor is looming over Earth, politicians are still denying it. Self-interested groups are denying it, right? And I think the challenge we've got with carbon is kind of around the world, there are so many intricate workarounds to have voluntary carbon trading schemes and emission trading. We just need a carbon tax, really. Yeah. But the reality is that governments around the world are scared to do it because of the incredible lobbying interests that prevent that. If we had a carbon tax, clean energy would already be absolutely cleaning up. But they do all these little rabbit hole workarounds instead. And then about creating like microgrids. They're actually really hard from a regulatory point of view. Ofgem's regulation opens with the word, Ofgem regulates the supply of electricity through wires. So as soon as you've got wires involved, then you've got regulation. There are things we can do, and we work with developers on small scales, but it is honestly incredibly complicated. I'm sorry because of time we can't go, but basically, as soon as electricity hits any part of the regulated network, it roughly trebles in cost because of all of the regulatory costs and the outdated market mechanisms, and that is a killer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to admit that this was a fantastic opportunity for us to hear Greg's thoughts on this too, and I'd like to, give you enormous support for what you're doing, and I want you to keep going into government and giving them headaches and making them anxious and worried and depressed, because what you're saying is right, and we all need to support you on doing that, and it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you very much to Greg Jackson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.